Yeah, and I really want to welcome everyone to this session. It's about insights for artists on digital exhibitions. As you all are logging on, we're going to have time for Q&A at the end. So you are welcome to turn on your cameras now if you want, but you can wait. I know sometimes when there's a presentation, people like to wait till we're in Q&A to turn on their videos, but there'll be opportunity for that. My name is Michelle Knapik. I'm with the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, and I'm just your volunteer moderator for this session. And I see everyone is already muted, so that's great. If you have a question during the presentation and when we get in Q&A, you can go into the participants box and raise your hand, your virtual hand, or just use the chat because I'm monitoring the chat for Rea. And I just want to say, Rea McNamara, it's just wonderful to be working with you. If you don't know, Rea is the Emily Hall Tremaine Journalism Fellow for Curators with Hyperallergic. So we're very honored to be supporting that position and reading all of everything that's coming from Rea. And she's got some amazing perspective on this topic of digital exhibition making. So Rea, I'm just going to turn it all over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Michelle, for the really generous introduction. And I also just want to just kind of point out, I'm based in Toronto, and I just want to acknowledge the land that I'm on. So for thousands of years here, Toronto's been, or Takaranto has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of Credit River. And today, Toronto is the meeting place of many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I'm really grateful to continue to have the opportunity to work and learn from the land. So, Chi-miigwech. So why don't we get into this? My goal was to kind of you know, talk and discuss things for 30-something minutes because I'm super excited to talk with all of you who are here and hear about your practice and what you're doing and hear some questions. In terms of what to expect, so I'm going to be talking about digital exhibition making, and really looking at it from the perspective of how it can destabilize, dismantle existing hierarchies, power structures. Obviously, we're at a time during a pandemic where we're really acutely aware of social inequity, gender justice, really pressing societal issues. So I'm very excited to kind of talk about digital exhibition making in this context. And to kind of, you know, especially as we, after I'll give you a sort of very, very brief kind of overview of internet art, looking at its kind of form and material, I want to talk about 3 case studies of 3 very different internet-based curatorial projects that have responded to the current COVID-19 pandemic. And then following that, sharing some sort of closing, sort of a framework to kind of consider the digital exhibition making, and then an open conversation. So a bit about myself. So as Michelle mentioned, I'm a writer, curator, public programmer in Toronto. I am currently the Emily H. Tremaine Journalism Fellow for Curators at Hyperallergic. My work there for the next 6 months is really going to be looking at how digital feminisms and utopias inform better online exhibition making practices. And these have definitely been key concerns in my, my work. I have a kind of curatorial and public programming that work that has an expanded practice that includes capacity building, image making, performance, and critical engagement with network publics. So I'm just gonna, you know, be a bit quick and dirty, and I'll just really highlight 3 projects for me that sort of demonstrate how I've kind of worked in this on-offline context. So right here, this here is a event GIF made from my friend and colleague and collaborator in the past, Lorna Mills, from this limited run art party series I organized called Shiros. Shiros ran from 2011 to 2012 and was a kind of party series that engaged with the collaborative processes of fandom culture through music, performance, installation, internet-based art. Every month, we organized a quote-unquote remix tribute to a female icon like Grace Jones, Yoko Ono, Erykah Badu, and kind of anointed them during the event into the League of Legendary Ladies. And this event took place in a queer bar in Toronto. We had interactive installations like a nail art bar, performance. So this GIF captures a performance by a performer from House of Monroe, a voguing crew in Toronto that was for our Grace Jones event. And behind the performer, you can see the projection of a GIF work by the Mexican artist Juan Manuel Morales. The project was significant because we had these real life events, and then online we had a Fuck Yeah Shiros Tumblr that documented, recirculated the project in terms of capturing the GIFs that we commissioned. And these GIFs were from international artists. Lorna Mills organized this, and so this was a project that, even though it took place in Toronto, had kind of massive scale that is really is exciting, the possibility of digital exhibition making. So that was one kind of key project. Another more recent project that I've done, it was a curator-led interactive viewing party called Obsessive Pop Tendencies. This was presented by Pleasure Dome, which is a media arts collective presenter. Oh, sorry, my audio is going in and out. Sorry about that. Should I be wearing headphones? If it cuts out, I can run and get headphones.
I think if you just talk a little more directly to your microphone, you're going to be great.
Okay then. Thanks everybody. I love this feedback. Thank you. Please don't, definitely cue me in the chat if anything else happens. So Shiros, or not Shiros, sorry, Obsessive Pop Tendencies. This was a project. It was a screening program. It was looking at how contemporary artists engage with fandom practices. This is definitely where a lot of my current research is at right now, just in terms of really looking at fan fiction, which is a subculture media fandom, and it's kind of intertextual forms of hybridity and otherness that can emerge from its collective queer femme imaginary. This particular documentation captures audience participation, waving of glow sticks during Ji-won Choi's film work, Parallel, which is a really amazing work that kind of looks at the history, modern history of Korean culture and art alongside the rise of K-pop. Glow sticks is a big thing in K-pop fandom. Anyways, and then lastly, the past few years, I was overseeing public programming initiatives for the Gardner Museum. So alongside my curatorial work, I definitely have done a lot of experiential change in organizations, institutions through steering experiential change and that happening through collaborative public projects, the creation of affinity spaces, learning professional development programming. So this here captures a local artist by the name of Ronnie Clark, who has an amazing practice that brings together dance, movement, choreography into digital art and installation. This performance was part of a 3-part event series called iBlank, where we were working with local collectives and organizations in presenting contemporary works by local artists that responded to specifically Yoko Ono's filmmaking. And this was part of public programming in support of the exhibition programming for the museum Yoko Ono, the Riverbed exhibition, which ran 2018, but I believe it was in New York the year before. So that's just a glance of some of my projects. So why don't we dip into a very, very brief history of internet art. I really kind of honed in on this just in terms of looking again at some key projects that reflect like the forms to be aware of. I just want to be totally upfront that I really pulled a lot of these works from Christiane Paul's digital art book in 2003, and a really great resource if you want to get a better sense of internet-based art and what's kind of happened. The Art Happens Here, Net Art Anthology, that is essentially an exhibition catalog that was produced by Rhizome for an exhibition they organized at the U Museum last year, is an amazing book and is just really thorough in presenting works, a survey of works from like the 1980s up until recent. So as we kind of get into this, internet art and things to kind of be aware of and to look through. So this here is MTAA, a two-person collective, the simple net art diagram from 1997. GIFs is obviously a really common format online for animated images. In the 90s and 2000s, you saw a lot of artists working with GIFs because of the way that they captured a nostalgia for the internet past. And really GIFs as a format really represents like the most immediate, reproducible, and visually specific kind of animated medium that is really the best for digital work, especially moving image work. My friend and colleague, Patty Johnson, who is the art critic and also founder of Art of City, she's written something definitely worth checking out, a really valuable history of animated GIF art from a few years back that was published by Art News, so I definitely encourage you to check that out. And what's great about this GIF in particular is it sort of really captures quite in a simple way, like this kind of call to action, like how kind of art happens with net art, with internet art. So you have here this like net diagram of two computer terminals that are being connected, and that kind of locating of the art happening there. It's about how net art sort of happens in between machines. It is both an action and performance, and it can't be extracted, from this kind of dialogue and conversation. And what's exciting about this particular work, that this was a work that definitely tapped in with remixing. This diagram was unlicensed. It was so any artist could remix it. So that was exciting with this work, is that they NTA put this diagram out, and then there was following remix by other artists to sort of articulate for themselves where the art happens. So moving along, we'll go a bit further. Look, isn't this so interesting? A Netscape browser, doesn't that take you back? So Olia Liliana is a net art pioneer, and I think her work, My Boyfriend Came Back from the War from 1996, is a really great example of hypertext narratives and that kind of experience of almost interactive hypertext fictional narratives. These are really common internet-based projects in the 90s. Liliana is really interesting in that her work deals a lot with net art, but also the vernacular web. Digital Folklore Reader is a great text that they've edited. She's also done a lot of awareness building around the preservation of vernacular web.
Yeah, I think you might need to lean in again.
Sorry again. Thank you. Thank you so much. So anyways, basically, so this work really sort of takes a visitor through this sort of reunion of this young female with this recovering soldier. And the way that the visitor moves through the work is through hypertext, through browser frames. And you can see in the design that as you go through the work, there's like increasing subdividing browser frames, mimicking the moving through this dark interior, looking through windows, voyeurism. It shows, and we'll talk about later, how the kind of an internet-based project can mimic spatiality in the physical space. Moving forward, Scawanetti has done really exciting work around avatars. Avatars is such a key, when you think about how you move through public network spaces, you're what your kind of avatar, your user pick is very key. And so Scout is a Mohawk artist based in Montreal that I wanted to highlight an older work of theirs, Cyber Powwow, which was a work that literally took place within the Palace, which was a popular avatar-based chat-based software, sorry, that was active in the late 90s. And Scout organized Cyber Powwow as a kind of space for other Indigenous artists to gather. From this work onwards to their work for the past years, I know, me too, Katie, is that now Scout actually does a lot of work within Second Life and creates machinima films and photography within this Second Life desolation that she maintains called Abtech, which is basically the abolition of cyberspace. And it's worth noting that Cyber Powwow is actually being currently restored right now by Rhizome, and we can talk about that later. Moving forward, archival databases has been also pretty common. This is a screenshot from Brian McCurran's Art Latino database, which was very simple website. It was hand-coded, text only, and was sort of, you know, a territorialized database of Latinx net artists and their works. Something that's worth noting too is that this project was happening in the early 2000s. This is a screenshot of the front page, so showing a ASCII art interpretation of a drawing from Joaquin Torres Garcia of Upside Down South America. And it's just kind of worth noting that the choice of poor design is sometimes, especially in past works and regions where internet access there's challenges, you know, high speed didn't come through everywhere. So that choice really informed that. And so that really brings attention to a sensitivity to audience and user, and kind of allowing that to inform the creation of a project and how it's accessed. You have here in the early, well, you know, coming into the early 2010s, group artist blogs were pretty big. This is a screenshot from NastyNets, which was an invite-only group artist blog. Artists like John Michael Bowling, Joel Holmberg, Guthrie Lonergan, and Marissa Olson and others were involved with this. And so group artist blogs were kind of really were forms of self-started artist networks. They were collaboratively run and very process-driven, kind of coined the term surf club, which was basically artists you know, participating in this, you know, activity of sharing decontextualized found media as a artistic practice, which today you kind of probably see in the ways that like artists engage with Instagram. Then moving forward, viral performance, obviously we've seen that in work in Jason Newson's alter ego Hennessy Youngman. And you know, what's really exciting about the Art Thoughts project that Newson did through the performance of Hennessy Youngman was that, you know, Hennessy Youngman was this persona that really, you know, cut through like art speak to talk quite intelligently and accessibly about race, institutional critique, talking about rap or even relational aesthetics. This video is a really great piece. It's 2 minutes, and it's insights, which is like basically how, you know, to make it in the art world, the male artist universality is still intact. I mean, there's still things we deal with. And I also think too, what's interesting about this project, paying attention to what it says about gatekeeping in the art world, who has a voice, who's able to sort of speak and have a platform. And lastly, in terms of, you know, internet art, I'm just going to land here on gaming interventions. So Angela Washco, this is a screenshot from their project, the Council of Gender Sensitivity and Behavioral Awareness in World of Warcraft. Basically, Angela did a series of performances that were documented as an avatar within World of Warcraft, where rather than furthering following a quest or retrieving items, basically tried to conversations around gender, and in doing so really brought attention to the sexism in gaming spaces. And so this is a really great example of, again, when we think about virtual environments, gaming spaces are really top in that regard, and whatnot. So moving along, I'm gonna just speed through 3 kind of projects. I'm gonna like give them 5 minutes so that we're, let's just say 2:05, 2:10, we'll then get into conversation. All right, so the first project we're going to talk about is WellKnown WTF ? So WellKnown WTF is a really good example of it launched in April, was one of the first online group projects that came out in response to COVID. The exhibition was organized by Faith Holland, Lorna Mills, Wade Wallerstein. These are all artists, curators, digital anthropologists that have worked, whether like with Faith's case, has done new media work deconstructing, you know, female sexualization, or someone like Lorna, who since the 90s has created, done significant work with the GIF. This is an exhibition that was 100+ artists focusing on moving image-based practices. And in the curator's words, was very much a kind of net art revival, like bringing at this time of increasing, you know, screen-based usage, really kind of bringing together artists who have been working in the space, whether since the 90s earlier, and more contemporary artists. So I'm going to give a sense of it. I'm going to give a bit of a walkthrough, an exhibition walkthrough. Now, when you come to the front page of WellKnown WTF, I feel like that front page is very similar to a title wall. So when we navigate our way through this, think about how this in a virtual way replicates on like a IRL exhibition. So if you look at Silicon Valley is a kind of quote unquote new parking lot for digital art and expanded practice. And the kind of branding of that platform is echoed in the branding of this title wall, which is, you know, you see this with other kind of institutionally organized or artist run center IRL shows. Once you kind of get past the kind of title wall, this is where you get into how to get into the rooms. So we know that a lot of galleries right now are having viewing rooms, and because most of the works in this show are works, so the works are either GIF works or video, having a grid-like design that mimics the rooms that you access, kind of horizontal in terms of the way we view these kind of like works, you can kind of see how the curators really thought through the medium of the works, and having that be echoed and sort of inform then the design of the exhibition space. So other thing worth pointing out too, these rooms have very playful names. What's great about this project, that not only just in the aesthetics of the artists that are presented, the vernacular web language is is prevalent, and that actually informs the you know, the naming of the rooms. So clusterfuck closet, you know, and what's great is that each room kind of highlights the kind of COVID-19, you know, area of interest. So the impact of COVID and art spheres, we see this so sad, or as we kind of move along, here you can see now we're looking at a screenshot of a Shawnee McElwain Holloway GIF work that's in the Stay Home and Masturbate room. And obviously, so this is a room that's dealing with intimate spaces and intimate ways of relating. And, you know, Shawnee's work is really exciting because, you know, Shawnee has been making videos, publications, software, GIFs that really address power and sexuality. And when you kind of see this, you can see how your to the left is the sort of main work that you're engaging with. Underneath is didactic, you know, the artist's name. To the right is then within the room, there is the names of artists. There is a navigating of different works that are represented with, again, the kind of grid. You can see here that, you know, this is a very, as much as this is explosive and emphasizes the kind of anarchic energies of the internet, it has a very clean and basic design, which is very important in terms of its accessibility. Moving along, something that I would just point as a, you know, a challenge with sometimes when you're thinking through these kind of works. So with this exhibition, these are screenshots of works by Eva Papamargariti, who's an artist in Greece and works a lot kind of with the hyperreal. And this work is a video work in the Zoom link please room. And if any of the video works, you literally have to, when you click on it, you are playing it in their YouTube playlist. So I will say that as much as I loved the response of this exhibition was the plethora of artists that they brought together. I do find that from a sort of flow, clicking out to watch the videos on YouTube kind of jarred me as a viewer. So that's just something to think about, how online projects are immersive in just the same way that real life sort of exhibition spaces could be. So I guess in closing, you know, the things that are really like I think are worth noting about this kind of exhibition is the fact that with digital exhibition making, the scalability, the fact that you can, this was a project that brought together 100+ artists. That's something that with an IRL exhibition, you don't necessarily, there's you know, there's barriers to that happening. The contrast between this sort of rich color saturation and kind of, again, anarchic energies of the works, and that being contrasted with a very clean, consistent grid-like layout and design. The rooms and that being the kind of way in which to view the works. And something worth noting is programming. So what was great about the curators with this project was that they were very thoughtful about making sure that they were doing programs like artist talks, curators talks that took place in Twitch. So we'll talk about that a bit further about, you know, when you're doing these shows, how you're tapping into kind of pre-existing social networks. Moving forward, so American Artist Loot is an example of a solo artist project that's supported by an institution, internet-based project. Loot is part of the Sunrise Sunset series that's curated by Christiane Paul, where basically artists like Lorna Mills, Kristen Lucas, Carla Ganis are commissioned to create these like 30 to 40 second projects that will animate the front web page of the Whitney at sunrise and sunset. So I'm gonna just here show you a kind of quick like clip, just showing what the experience is like. This was shot at sunrise last Friday, so I'm gonna just show it here for you. Okay, so that was a quick animate, you know, show you what the experience was like navigating this work. So basically, you know, what this project does, it's really amazing in the sense of how it really looks at the museum online space as a space that is still it still reproduces in archives that perpetuate settler colonialism. So in what American Artist does in that kind of moment of, you know, darkening the screen and replacing the images with obviously images of plywood, it's also a project that alludes to at the time, like this was launched in July, we know in June, during when there was, you know, the BLM protests, a lot of museums and, you know, retailers boarded up the facades of their building. And, you know, that says a lot about the value that these organizations place on human life sometimes. And it's a project, American Artists, that plays with, you know, obviously the dual meaning of looting, right? And again, sort of shows about how in the online space do we bring attention to what is happening physically and the way the museums board it up, and what is exactly in these kind of collections, right? What I also love about this project is how it also really authentically extends the work that American Artists does. So American Artists, you know, is an artist that does a lot in terms of drawing connections between systematic forms of racism and new technological developments. So this is a screenshot from a project they did called Refusal, where they basically replaced all the kind of graphics of their Facebook profile with in redacted. So redaction is a big part of their work, and there's a comment on, you know, obviously with this kind of blue, there's an art history here, but then also when you think about BLM and Blue Lives Matter, there is a comment around, you know, racial capitalist violence. And, you know, again, thinking about anti-Blackness, how it's embedded in the algorithms of our, you know, the technologies we use. So with regards to that, I love how this project, when we talk about dismantling of institutional kind of power and commenting, this is a great example of that. And it's also, what's unique about it too is the way that this is a project that is sensitive to it being discovered, its work being discovered by, say, an internet user that it goes to witness it, has heard about it, but then also the internet user that unexpectedly encounters it if they're on the site. So that's something to consider too. Lastly, I'm going to talk about a recent project, Crisis Vision, that is a good example of an internet-based project. Sorry, I'll keep up on the screen, this audio here. It's an internet-based project that literally takes place within a social platform, so in this case, Instagram. So a group, it's led by Canadian artist Andrea Cooper, who convened other Canadian artists that have performance but also media art practices. So Mikiki, Skawanetti, CZ Powers, where they would basically create filters using this accessible software and distributing these filters, and these filters work thinking through art as a kind of catalyst for social change. So this here, you can see this is a screenshot of the Instagram profile. Now, just to point out that when you encounter an Instagram project, this is probably not your first point of entry. Probably your first point of entry or encounter is literally encountering, say, seeing the filter in your, you know, when you're using Instagram, or if one of the artists reshared this and you're part of their feed. So, so that's just something to kind of think about, how a kind of more a project situated within a social platform is a bit different from a web-based, that there is not such a kind of linear narrative, and there's different points of entry. Here you can see, so there's the two screenshots, and you can see here, you can see how the documentation and what's produced is varies. So here we have the Instagram profile showing a video that Mikiki did of themselves using a filter. So Mikiki's filter, is it for me too, is a filter that, in sort of having the user be painted, it really is kind of looking at, you know, how, and Mikiki, I've worked with them before, they're an activist, performance artist, queer. This is definitely looking at how this is interrogation of popularization of drag cultures and for mainstream straight and cisgender audiences. To the right is an example where the documentation of another user using CZ Powers filter, the anti-selfie, which, you know, is looking at invisibility, the right that users have to navigating, to cloaking their identity through, you know, the surveillance capitalism that is the internet. And then here, I wanted to note that another thing to think about with social platforms is this is two screenshots showing one of Andrea Cooper's AR filters that she made as an artist within the project. And then to the right, the to the right showing the curatorial text, which you know, is at the bottom of the image, and you can see how the artist is again engaging with vernacular web language, using emoji, using hashtags, because obviously hashtag continues to be a way in which work, what have you, can be discoverable by a wider audience. So in closing on that project, it's, you know, it's really tapping into the networked engagement. It's using AR filters, which are hugely popular right now. The other thing worth noting is that this project was funded by the Canada Council's Creation Accelerator. And so in Canada, at least, and I'm sure we can talk about this, and this is the case in the United States and elsewhere, that a lot of funders and institutions are definitely, especially right now, investing in digital engagement. So this project, you know, one of the reasons why it was funded was that essentially the organizers, like the artists themselves, learned how to use these tools. And through this distribution, it was, you know, also kind of creating greater awareness for these tools, these storytelling tools that other artists or general audiences can tap into. So there is an interesting kind of professional development component to this. We'll talk about vulnerability around how social platform focused projects in the next slide, but let's just say documentation is very key. We can talk about it in the conversation, but document, screenshot. All right, so this is my last slide, because then we'll talk. But I'll just kind of note what are sort of key points around accessible, sustainable frameworks to think about, which is definitely thinking about context, how your work is situated within this broader history. Community and audience are definitely really key determining factors and should guide you for choice of platform. So for an example, like WTF, that was a massive online exhibition, and it made sense to create a separate standalone website. But then Crisis Vision, because that project is about engaging on social platforms and using AR filters, obviously that's a project that has to take place there. Sensitive about, again, you know, being sensitive, transparent with the systems you're engaging with. We really see that with Looted, in that the ways that, you know, our online cultures and spaces can perpetuate power structures and hierarchies. And I'll kind of add to that, when we talk about you know, that piece there, you just really have to be sensitive that, you know, say if you're making a film work, or that, you know, you gather release forms from, you have to think of that if you're doing something interactive that is gathering data, to really think that, to know that community data is sacred, and to really take responsibility, and being really clear with the users that are interacting with your project, like what information you're getting. Social platform engagement and outreach, you saw that with WTF and their programming taking place on Twitch. So it's really important to think about how does your work tap into that, where other audiences and networks are. And then in closing, archive, legacy, looking beyond immediate impact. There are real costs around archiving, and there's definitely a lot of scholarship emerging now around, you know, digital time-based media art preservation, and you know, Rhizome's doing a lot of kind of you know, emulating of older works, but you really have to think about, you know, if you have a standalone, the cost of maintaining that web presence, making sure that if interaction, you know, like say the Instagram projects, taking screenshots of how it's been shared, to really then to capture like your project and what kind of happened there. Okay, so thank you so much. I feel like I sped through a lot, and I'm really excited to now open this conversation up and take any questions or clarify anything. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rea. That completely fascinating. I think something may have happened with my chat, because I'm not seeing if there are questions in the chat right now, but if folks want to go into the participant box, you can raise your hand and then we can call on folks. And maybe you can take off the screen share so we can see you, and then we can see everyone else who's
Okay. There
on
we
the screen together. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of us. And,
hi, thank you for that.
and I'm just going to encourage folks to maybe, if you can, if you're comfortable, turn on your video so we can have some Q&A with Rea. I'm sure you all want to dig in on this more, and she'd love to see you. So you can either raise your hand on screen, or you can raise your hand in the participant queue. Fantastic. And Rea, how did you get into the space of digital exhibitions? Like, what took you there? What was compelling, and what artists took you there?
That's a good question. I mentioned earlier how a lot of my work around digital exhibition making and organizing has been really informed by engagement with internet subculture. So I literally, since my girlhood, have been involved with media fandom, and so that was definitely sort of a first entry point. And then when I started as a journalist, this actually existed. I had a social media column for Metro, and that was around 2010. And it's actually through covering projects like Dump.fm, as well as profiling artists like Lorna Mills and Sally McKay. And also around that time, I, joined Google Plus, and Google Plus around 2010 was where a lot of internet-based artists were gathering. So it was really just from there, meeting more artists. I mean, Lorna has been a really important collaborator and friend, and someone that I have huge respect for. And so literally it was from that experience, and then organizing Shiros, because at the time I was, organizing parties and DJing. And so it was definitely came out of that time of my community facilitation and yeah, nightlife engagement.
Nice. We got some folks, Wendy and Katie, you turned on cameras. Did you have specific questions you wanted to pose to Rea?
Yeah, I'm curious if you're seeing any differences in the sort of engagement with artists in big cities versus more rural artists, because it seems like, paradoxically, even though rural artists sort of need to use this platform more, they're inclined to use it less. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question, because obviously we know that in RL sense, you being an artist working urban context or rural, you are very much impacted by then what are the institutions or artist-run centers that you have access to. So unfortunately, if you're an artist in an urban setting, you have more access to those resources, whereas in a rural setting, that's maybe not the case. So you're far more dependent on accessing spaces like Facebook, like Instagram, to network, but also to obviously as a kind of platform for creating greater awareness for your work, or as a platform for collaboration. I know when I was talking with Andrea Cooper, so it's worth noting that Andrea Cooper, she's based in Newfoundland. And, this project that was funded by the Canada Council, Crisis Vision, it's just the first phase. The next phase, they're actually really interested in engaging Canadian artists nationally, so artists that are not just in cities, but also in rural. So I would like to think optimistically that especially during this time, I think artists in rural settings can do very interesting hybrid projects, because in a rural setting, you have space. So you can do really imaginative, you know, works that say involve, you know, a performance that is then streamed through Instagram Live, and you obviously have more, because we don't know where in our different cities or places where we're all going to be in our second wave lockdown. So I think in a rural setting, you have that kind of like that physical space that you can kind of work with more. Obviously, in like an urban setting, you know, there's the limitations. There's limitations there, but I do feel like what's exciting about this time, it does kind of evens the field. I mean, now like we can all access like all the programming's online. So if you want to hear a cool talk about, you know, which I did a week or so, an NYU talk on time-based art preservation. I'm in Toronto. I would not have been able to access that program, but you know, with Zoom, I can. So I think there is like, there's great opportunity in that things have kind of flattened. And I think that people are kind of curious people are going to have more of a curiosity and hunger to sort of see people's their setting, their context, their experience to have access to that. I think that's going to become more urgent, you know? I don't know if I answered your question though. Thank you.
Fantastic. Maybe Rosemary was going to jump in?
Sure. Hi. Hey, hey, Rea, thanks for the talk. This is a question about scale, because as we know, internet communities can have like massive scale, like YouTube videos get literally billions of views. So when you're talking about an art exhibition, what's limiting these types of presentations from getting equivalent size of audiences? Like, I know it's not pop culture and it's not music, but is it a question of marketing or building an audience? Like, is that potential there? I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, the challenge with, say, like, let's kind of have YouTube fall under the umbrella of a pre-existing social platform. Obviously, the upside is that your project, your works can tap into a broader, kind of more unlikely, unsuspecting audience. But it also can be really lost in the sheer amount of data and material there. So I think for sure, you know, there has to be, you know, so on one hand, there can be consideration made for, like, if you look at Angela Washco's work or like Skawanetti, like their work is just as much about their kind of engagement in the social space and doing work within that hasn't really happened before. So critical engagement, making other players talk about gender in, you know, the world that is Warcraft, you know, that's something that I think will connect it to an immediate community. That would be, you know, I think about, like, I know, Rosemary, that you've done a lot of work with like blockchain. And so I think in that regard, if you were doing something that was tapping into that context, it would be really worthwhile then to think about, again, how blockchain and the users of that kind of culture, where they're kind of gathering, and what is the sort of ways in which, you know, so for instance, in the tech world, like white paper, you know, we talked about this, Rosemary, these are sort of markers of that kind of culture that open up as almost opportunity to reflect back these kind of norms and really make people kind of question the way they participate in these spaces. So, and I did recently a project I did in the past, which I didn't really, you know, talk about. I did this project for The Wrong called the Byway Art Foundation, and that project was a standalone website, but it was a satire of a discount retailer that's since no longer existing in Canada, but a discount retailer attempting to create an art foundation as a way to revitalize their brand. And so that informed then, okay, this is going to look like a sort of splashy corporate art foundation that knows nothing about art. And that informed like the works that were commissioned. Like one artist, Rodell Warner, who's a Trinidad-based digital artist, created these, you know, GIF tourism kind of limited run objects that were these like, you know, GIF works. Another artist, they created, you know, this really great, they were based in Jamaica, Deandra, Caprice, Davis, and so they created these GIF works, and so we sort of set up this fiction that these were GIFs of digital display screens in the Byway Art Foundation's Jamaican, you know, resort. So all this to say is that, like, you know, and that's what I appreciate about an artist like, you know, Jason Mewson, is the use of humor and satire. I think those are really like great ways to, again, kind of, you know, cut through sometimes the barriers with art. Because definitely I think when you work in an online context, you have to be really aware that there's this broader, this isn't just the art audience you're tapping, it's a broader audience. Anyway, sorry, I don't know if I answered that question. That was
a great answer. Thank you.
Well, that was good, and we are going to have to end on that note. I feel like we were probably just digging into some questions, so make sure you follow up with Rea, and thank you all for being here. Take your self-break care and get ready for a next wonderful set of breakout sessions. All right, everybody, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it. Rea, thank you. That was brilliant. Really, your expertise is deep. Appreciate it. All right, everybody, I'm going to end us here. Take care.
Thank you.